Hi, thank you all for coming. This is my senior project. So what I did, what I wanted to make was a media recommendation web app. So when you go on Amazon or Netflix, they have recommendations for you based on what you have in the past, you've interacted with, you've shown that you've liked or disliked. So I'm going to do something that would take those likes and dislikes and make recommendations based off of that. So to do this, there are a number of technologies that I had to use. The most important were NetBeans. This was my IDE, my integrated development environment. This was most importantly where all the code was written, which is very useful for a programming project when you'll write code. Second of all, this was able to handle running the project. There's automated processes that allow me to do that. I won't go into detail on that. If you want more detail, come to the table, I'll explain. And then I can integrate that with a program called Git. Git is a version control system. What this is, it is a program that keeps track of the entire history of the code. And each point in history is called a commit. So I make a commit, and if something goes wrong with the commit, I can revert it. Or if later in the project I want to go back and build off of that certain commit, I can do that. And that's called making a branch. So if there are features I want to test, I can make a branch called test that would contain all of my commits that perhaps aren't stable, that I don't want to push to the master branch. It's the main branch that contains the most stable build that I know at least works to some capacity. Next, I use a number of server software. These are programs that run just like any other program. What they do is they are able to return data to a web browser that's trying to access it. So the most important component, most important server was Apache Tomcat. This is a container. It runs Java code in the server. And it's very lightweight, it's fast, it's efficient. So this allows me to very easily just keep my code, put it up in the cloud, and it'll run for me. Next up, I used Node.js. Technically, I wasn't using the actual server, the server for Node.js. I was using a program along with it called NPM. It stands for Node Package Manager. And what a package manager is, it connects to the internet, and it has a collection of code, of projects that other people wrote that I can then download, that I can include in my project. So it eases the burden on me as far as developing things that I don't need to. Last up, I use SQL Server. SQL stands for Structured Query Language. So this is a database language. And SQL Server is developed by Microsoft. It is their database offering for relational databases. And at its core, a relational database is it's a collection of tables, and each table can contain a reference to just another table. It doesn't have to, but the idea behind a relational database is that tables can be related, and there are links that prevent things from happening that you don't, like data being lost. Next up, to retrieve media results, search results, I use two APIs. API stands for Application Programming Interface. The first one was OMDB, but at its core, it's really just IMDb. So the Internet Movie Database. You may have heard of it. So that contains results for movies, television shows, and also some video games. And then for the music side of things, I used Music Brains. So artist albums, singles, EPs, compilations, mixtapes, whatever, that's got it all. So I've alluded to this, there are two components to it. There is the backend, this is the Java code running in Tomcat. And what this does is the front end, the browser, it sends a request to the server, and the server generates a response and it sends it back. It's very simple, very simple. So I used CSS and JavaScript on the front end. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and as the name implies, it allows the page to be styled. And then JavaScript is just code that runs in the browser. it can manipulate elements. It can also asynchronously, I'll go into this later, it can asynchronously send requests to the server without having to reload the page. Now this is just the diagram of what the app looks like. So the user searches for something in the category that they want. Next, they will vote on it as either like or dislike. From there, the system can group similar users based on the list together. And then from those similar users, they can be recommended items. So for example, user A has, I don't know, Avengers on their list. And they also have, and then another user has Avengers. So those two users can be considered similar. So maybe items that are on the other user's list, I don't know, Ant-Man, let's say that's on his list. Well, if user A doesn't have that, then he can be recommended Ant-Man. Now, I have 5 objectives for the project. First was to expand my knowledge of advanced programming, to expand my toolkit, have lots of resources that I can use. Second of all, I want to become a better presenter. It's going well. Next, I wanted to understand good application design and good code management. Not just being able to write code, but being able to have an abstract idea of what's going on, what I can do with it, what it means. And last of all, I wanted to get experience deploying an application. So deploying is when you have the code and you basically send it off to a data center and they will run the code for you instead of having to run it in your own browser on your own server. They have it all set up for you. I'm going to get experience doing that. And to that end, my outcomes of the project, I have a professional looking code repository on GitHub. It has entire history. It has a README file that explains some of the functionality. It's more technical. I wouldn't recommend it if you don't know what you're doing to read it. It is information how to run it yourself, build it if you want to. Second of all, I do have a working front end and back end with all the necessary components. Third of all, I made a database that would store information. So first I have a log of all of the searches. So it's not really useful at the moment, but in the future, I could make it so that there is a list of popular things that are popular. So users can look at that and they can perhaps add those items to the list if they've seen it. I also have, of course, a user system. This was all good since later, but a user database of usernames, passwords, stuff like that. First of all, I have code testing.
But you want to keep.
So the specific type of testing I have is unit testing. These are designed atomically, meaning that each test is independent of each other. It tests one part of the code, one part
Yeah,
of the
that's why.
These are designed to make sure that if something goes wrong, I can easily be notified of what went wrong. To make this easier, I added continuous integration. This is a web service similar to GitHub that when I make changes to the code, when I push it to the service, it will run the test for me. I don't need to do anything. If something goes wrong, it will notify me what went wrong, and then I can fix that problem, which is great. So the last thing, of course, I did deploy to the cloud, as I was hoping to talk more about that later as well. This was my logo that I created. Granular Software, that is the company name. Granular being a reference to film grain, which is reminiscent of old movies. It's kind of that effect. It's hard to make out in here, but I did apply it. It's little dots. I don't even know if you can see it all. That's kind of what the grain effect is. Also, the infinity symbol, it's a very complex symbol. It symbolizes the infinite possibilities that my company brings. So, it takes a little bit of imagination to understand it. It's very complex. Second of all, do have a red stripe, striking red stripe to bring out the boldness the sharpness of what I'm doing. Last of all, the font design, it gives a code aesthetic, very pleasing to me. These are my advisors. First of all, my expert, Dr. Kitaev. Coincidentally, also my dad. He has over 20 years programming experience, so very well qualified in my opinion. My support advisors in here, I have Noah and Sai. They gave me more support. Also, Sai helped me a little bit, giving me some feedback on the code aspect. And then last of all, my mom, Autumn Sears, gave me some moral support at home when I was crying. I mean, not crying. Okay, so previous experience. Taking computer science courses at Grandview since I was a freshman. First was Intro to .NET. .NET is the Microsoft framework. If you use a Windows computer, there is a 90% chance you have used a .NET application. So the language that I was introduced to this was Visual Basic, which is very, very old, but it still does teach me those fundamental concepts like data types and arrays, which are collections of data types, and also some simple input-output. So reading from files, writing to files, and that's just good foundations to have. Second of all, I took AP Computer Science, which taught me more about object-oriented design. What that means is that each part of the code, each file, it has one purpose only. It is an object that does one thing. There's more complicated things to it, like inheritance, but at its core, object-oriented design is the most widely adopted paradigm. And then I also looked at some basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript. As I said, those are front-end languages. I didn't really do a class on these, but I've had some experience with them in the past. Now, research. So this is the back end of the application. We have essentially two containers here. So the web container and the Bean container. These are running in Tomcat. What the Bean is it communicates with the web container. This is the code. It also can communicate with an applet container. I don't have that. Applets are JavaScript that runs in the browser. I didn't do that. So it communicates with these here, servlets and JSP. Right there. Servlet and JSP. So these are just code that can respond to a request. That's all they are at their core. What the Bean does is it stores session information. So like username, their list of likes and dislikes, what they searched for, sort of things like that. And to that end, I had to research some data structures. So that's the AP Computer Science AP course. It's not offered anymore, but Mr. Szymanski, I don't know if he's in here, he gave me some curriculum that I could look at. So it contains lots of nice data structures, like sets, which are collections of items that are all unique. Each item is unique. There can be no duplicates. Similar to that, there are maps, which are key value pairs. There is a key that corresponds to a value, that's it. And there can be no duplicate values in the sets. Another one are linked lists. These are used to ensure that a list of items stays ordered, that nothing can be changed, that each reference stays the same. So, SQL. First problem is database connectivity. So Java does provide the JDBC, the Java Database Connectivity Interface. What this is, it is basically a connection string. It contains, first of all, a link to the database itself. It is hosted on the web. It's a server. So it contains a link to that. It also contains the username and password to authenticate with it to make sure that only I can access it. Then queries and updates. So queries, it's very simple. It's when you query data from the database. It's when you retrieve data when you want to look something up. You would query it. And when you want to update the database, you would add new values in, you would change values. That's all it is. Very simple syntax. Not going to go into it. It's very simple. And then last problem is password security. So the primary way to achieve this is through encryption. And I already knew a little bit about this. I didn't know how to implement this in my code though. So essentially, I use SHA, the secure hash algorithm. What this does is it changes any length password. It takes that, it digests it, it performs computations on it, multiple computations. In fact, I have running it over 100,000 iterations of this to make it as secure as possible. It just digests it, and it turns it into a fixed length string of 256 bits, which is about 64 characters long in hexadecimal characters. Don't even know what that is, but it makes it so that the password is secure, and even if someone, for some reason, gains access to my database, they can't see passwords. Next up, we have the front end. Here is a diagram of the data flow in the front end. It is the MVVM pattern, the model, view, model. This is similar to MVC, model view controller. Don't need to know specifics about it, but essentially the view is the CSS code. It's the CSS. It is what people see, what people interact with, what people type into. The model is all the data that all the variables that I have stores that I want to set values to and I want to control. And then the view model, it updates each both the view model and model. It makes it so that if the view updates, if the user types something in, the model will update accordingly. If the model changes, if my code does something, the view model, or the view will update, the view model will update the view. Very simple. System of notifications and communication. So I want to just learn the CSS. I want to learn about responsive design. This is an age where pretty much, I'd say, the majority of the time, the internet is accessed on mobile devices like phones and tablets. So I need to be able to make responsive designs like when you go on Wikipedia, it's a different layout than when you look at Wikipedia on your desktop. Your phone layout is different. So I need to research that. I'm a programmer. I'm not good at design. I'm not visual at all. So I use something called Twitter Bootstrap, or just Bootstrap. It is supported by Twitter, as the name implies. It is a web design framework that allows me to easily style elements, make it responsive by default. And then in addition to that, I used Font Awesome. It has some icons. It's not really necessary per se, but why not? Add some flair, I guess. Great. So next up we have JavaScript, which, as I said, this is code that runs in the browser. It is based off of two object models, the DOM and the BOM, the document object model and the browser object model. The document object model is just a collection of the elements on the page, and those can be manipulated in any way you see fit. The browser object model is the browser, so that can be used to reload pages or to send alerts to people, or I don't know. The possibilities are endless. JavaScript is designed to give you full control over what goes on, well, within some security constraints. So to make my JavaScript development experience a little more easier, I use two tools, mainly two tools. First tool is Webpack. What this is it allows me to bundle multiple resources, so multiple JavaScript files, multiple CSS files, all into one file. So instead of when I make the HTML page, when I make the write the markup, to the page, I only need to load one thing. So it makes this way simpler. And then second of all, I used a program called Babel. Babel is known as a transpiler. This is a program that translates code in one language to another language. So there are two JavaScript standards out there. The most recent is ECMAScript 6, and the most standard one, if you will, is ECMAScript 5. So I wanted to try ECMAScript 6. I wanted to take advantage of all the nice new features that are offered by the latest release, the latest standard. So what Babel does is it applies transformations to the code. It makes it so that older browsers like Internet Explorer, although you shouldn't be using Internet Explorer, it makes it so that it'll run properly in whatever browser is being accessed from. Next up, I use two libraries. First was jQuery. And everyone loves jQuery. People think that it's a language, actually. It's not true, it is just JavaScript. And at first I was skeptical. I didn't really get it, I didn't know what it was good for, but then I started writing some, and it is really useful. It makes manipulation of the DOM and DOM very easy, very, very easy. I love it. Second of all, going back to the asynchronous things, it can perform IAX, so asynchronous JavaScript and XML. It doesn't necessarily need to be XML. XML is just a data format. What I did use it for, though, was JSON data. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It is very simple. Each object has a property, and that property has a value associated with it. That value can be anything. It can be a number, it can be a string, like a movie title. And that allows me to send data to the server without needing to load the page, to reload the page. Very simple. And of course, but Knockout will provide the MVVM right here. Very simple. Here's an example of responsive design. This is from my project website, not my application. It makes use of media queries, as you can see here. There are 3 boxes on the largest layout. This is the desktop/laptop design. And then here, this is for tablets. There are 2 boxes. And then on the phone layout, there is a 1 box. So that just changes the widths at each as a breakpoint in the code, a set resolution that you need to apply different styles to. And here, this is another feature that is part of Babel. This is known as minification. What it does is it takes a lot of code and it makes it into a little code, which is great because you don't need to load as much code when you browse down with it. It's very simple. Just apply some transformations to it. Changes things around, moves comments, removes spaces. Very simple. Now, there were a number of pitfalls in the project. The first was my web server. First, I was using Glassfish. An application server, meaning it has all of the bells and whistles. It is a reference implementation of Java, of the enterprise Java, web Java. But it couldn't connect to my database, so that was very problematic because I needed to be able to connect to the database. So we switched to Tomcat, which, as I said, is very lightweight. It is a container server, so we're 10 times smaller than Glassfish. Way faster, way better. You couldn't be happier with it. Second of all was my hosting. First, I was using Amazon Web Services, AWS, which was very difficult to use. I could not get my app deployed on their platform. Not going to announce Amazon, but their web service platform kind of sucks. So I switched to Microsoft Azure. Azure is very similar to AWS, but it's much easier to use. I got it up and running in 5 minutes, basically, a little more than 5 minutes. Very simple to use. Couldn't be happier with that. But the last pitfall I cannot get through is the recommendation algorithm. There was prerequisite functionality that I had not implemented that had to be implemented, and I did not plan this out properly. I'm blaming myself for it, I'm not blaming anything else. It's just poor timing, poor planning. So with that, we're going to go into the timeline. In October, I was dipping my feet into web design with my project website. This differs from my app, and that is completely static, nothing is generated. The response is always going to be just the same exact page. So I learned a little bit about CSS. Researched some JavaScript, learned about events. So whenever something happens in the browser, it causes an event to occur. Very simple. Just want to register a custom domain for the website too that I can use. November, I was just looking at the ACS AB material, so lots of data structures. And by the end, there were a number of structures that I had already gone over in previous lessons, so that time I could dedicate to researching more libraries and frameworks, like I said, with NPM, the packages that I could use with my project. After that, it was just a matter of finishing some stuff for the semester for this class, which was the job shadow. And finals week wasn't really doing anything. Research and hosting, that's where the AWS stuff came in. And then also, after that, I began developing the app. And into January, I was developing the just basic functionality before mid-years. And then when mid-years came around, that was just a matter of basically just giving this presentation, but a little bit shorter time format. After that, I did start to research the recommendation engine. So after I did that, I realized, as I said, I did not have enough in the app as is to make a working recommendation engine. I just had to cut everything out in the month of February, except the advisor meeting, which went and met with my advisor, and told them how everything was going. It went okay. So March was a way, I was just updating the web interface, applying Bootstrap, as I said before, and then I was setting up a user account system in the database with the password encryption. And spring break, just catching up, testing the code, and now in April, I have been running more tests and also deploying to the cloud and finally making this presentation so I can get to here. And it's been quite the journey. That's it. Thank you.